As some of you may know, we have routinely placed a sharp and specific focus on cancer and its uh, often cataclysmic psychological impact on the patient. We have spoken with psychologists, oncopsychologists specifically. We have spoken with a Gynac-Onco-Surgeon. We've spoken with survivors. But as is fairly common knowledge, that when an illness like cancer takes place with and to an individual, it is something that transcends that person and also has a profound impact on people immediately around that person, especially the caregivers, close family, friends, whoever is, sort of day in and day out caring for that person and looking after them. And caregiver trauma, caregiver burnout are terms that one has heard of, but from specifically a cancer standpoint, we ought to also speak specifically to a cancer caregiver to sort of gain a better understanding of what they may experience, feel, and go through. It so happens that, as you know, I had cancer, and so we figured that instead of going to anybody else, it would be our founder, the founder of Driveway Devi, my wife, partner, caregiver, Anuja, who would perhaps be the best person to speak about this. And so I'm very grateful that she's joining us. It's not something that's pleasant to talk about. And also very grateful that she's the one who suggested the theme in the first place, in terms of the fact that we had, sort of missed out on speaking to a caregiver, which is such an important functionary in this entire process. This is Talk Therapy, brought to you by Driveway Devi. I'm Kartik on behalf of Driveway Devi, and we are calling today's session Caregivers Cancer, because it may be fair to say that when cancer happens, it is indeed something that equally, if not more, impacts those around the individual. Anuja, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for taking my suggestion and having me here.
So let's dive straight in. I want you to talk about your immediate sense of when the diagnosis was made of my cancer. What were your feelings? Was it sort of, did you feel sort of numb and zoned out, or what were some of those most initial reactions?
So, in all honesty, my first reaction was anger because I remember just a few weeks or a couple of months before this diagnosis having a fight with you, saying that your smoking is not doing you any good. You have a child to think of, a future to think of. So, this needs to end lest something very serious happens. And then it happened. And I've always, I feel, been, I won't like to use the word clairvoyant, but just I just have an instinct about things. And I knew, I mean, one knows it would not lead anywhere good, this habit. uh, so it was literally like my worst fear realized. So it was anger. And yeah, I'm sorry for it now, but I think for the first 24 hours, I only was, you were at the receiving end of my anger. But beyond that, it was just numbness. Uh, this out of body experience that you feel, like what is happening? Is it real? Like, in a dream or what? Those were my first initial two reactions.
One has also heard a fair few people say things like it didn't sink in or it doesn't sink in. Um,
That's the denial part of it. So it's not about sinking in, it's more about uh, hoping that the diagnosis is wrong. The doctors got it wrong, or the labs got it wrong, or it was a cold and not cancer, or whatever it was. I'm hoping that the tumor found is benign. So it's just hoping against hope, I would say. That's the denial part of it, and that's why it doesn't feel
Sure.
real.
I mean, those are all, I think, part of the initial response set. However,
Hmm.
as time goes on, because this can be a longish process, one typically consults several doctors, and by the time the family as a unit decides on what way forward they will adopt amongst couple of options, there can be couple of weeks, maybe even a month or two that goes. So after the most initial response, and let's say a few weeks into knowing, does that evolve? Did it evolve for you? And if it did, what did it evolve into?
I personally have always been a very proactive, take charge sort of person. So it was always, chalo jo bhi ho gaya, now let's deal with it. But I mean, maybe I blocked it out of my head, but maybe we seesawed. Maybe you had bad days and maybe I had bad days, and you had to, pull each other up. We were very lucky that we had doctor friends who rallied around us and kept assuring us and saw us through this. But I think the disbelief goes on longer than anything else, because one is so conditioned to think that cancer, like it, and that's the end, and nothing beyond that will ever happen. In that moment it just consumes you, and that disbelief just takes over. But yeah, then our treatment got going fairly quickly, and we were assured that the cancer you had is very treatable. So it all uh, I was able to deal with it better. I Googled the hell out of this thing, as everybody does. Maybe they shouldn't. But you look up survival rates and you look up lifestyle changes. A few friends of yours had sent you books. I don't know if you remember, which you never read, but I did. So that's how I deal with things. I think ahead, I prepare myself, and yeah, just deal with it. Maybe it's pure adrenaline, I don't know, but that's what it was for me, beyond.
So the idea here is that from these very, very intimate and personal and painful insights that you're sharing, we can extract practical sort of steps that maybe
Hmm,
others can take. So if I've
correct,
heard you and understood you correctly, number one thing that helped you was the fact that there was a support system around you, around us,
correct. Yes,
and so, therefore, it might be worth actively investing in creating that kind of community around oneself, especially pertinent, I think, today, as we are starting to lead more and more insular, disconnected lives, big city living, etc., where friendships, dynamics, relationships are really transactional and motivated by certain factors. And I think that's all the more reason to seek meaningful community and build that around oneself. The other thing I'm hearing is a certain amount of, and I say this with a lot of responsibility because I can't even imagine how difficult it is. So I'm not at all suggesting that it's easy or anything, but given those extremely trying circumstances, to in them try and be as practical as possible, and therefore also rely on fact, rely on knowledge, rely on information, and use that to best navigate the situation. I think these are two primary sort of takeaways from what you
Yeah,
last
yeah.
shared. And yeah, they make absolute sense. You did mention that. mm, and of course, one also understands that contradictory or seemingly contradictory feelings can coexist, and they often do, especially in these kinds of situations. When you say that जब कैंसर के बारे में पता लगता है तो one tends to feel that this is it, life is over. Can I then say that there were days or moments or phases where you felt completely hopeless?
Well, I don't think I did because, like I said, pretty soon after your diagnosis, we were told that if one is to have cancer, this one should be it. So I don't think I felt hopeless, but I think that little fear that was planted that day continues to live in one's heart. So I can't say that's gone. Uh, so yeah, no, I don't think I feel hopeless, but I think it's just this little flicker of a fear that's then constantly in me.
Just to return to those weeks and months, and because you haven't brought it up, of course, these are again extremely painful things to think back on. Amongst all that you've already shared, how much consciously or at the back of your mind were other very, very relevant and allied considerations, such as our young daughter, what's going to become of that? And, just even if you had by then established that ye marega nahi, but, because and I'll tell you why I'm asking this. I'm asking this because children, as we know, are sponges. They are highly perceptive, they are highly receptive. It doesn't have to meet the final fate of death, even despite, I mean, even in other scenarios of, a parent, which is, of course, an extremely significant individual in any child's life, being seen to be undergoing treatment, not being able to quite comprehend what's happening with him or her, all of those things impact. And I remember after begging and begging after my thyroidectomy, when you did bring Krisha to the hospital, which is something I regret having made you do till today. She said she didn't come near me, and she was scared. So,
Yes.
so were those kinds of things also playing on your mind?
I mean, I suppose like I said, I'm more practical and you are a more emotional person. So I knew that that hospital scenario wasn't something a child should be exposed to. She was very young to begin with, and hospitals can be, germ central. So that was one concern. And yeah, also not to see you like this, etc. Uh, her Well, at that point, okay, I'll tell you what my thought behind this discussion was yes, of course, dealing with the diagnosis and all of that. But I feel that the aftermath, the years and years after the actual, diagnosis and treatment, etc., is something one is not warned about. Like I
Huh,
like to joke.
I'm interrupting you.
Huh,
We'll come to
huh.
that. If you can just
Yeah.
respond to that specific point, and then we are going into that only.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I don't think so because I mean, it had nothing to do with your cancer or anything. It was literally that one isolated situation that I don't
Okay.
think a child should be exposed to
Right,
hospital and certainly not seeing you so helpless and on
right,
a bed
right.
and with putty and all.
Right.
That's just
ठीक है,
not
fine,
pleasant.
fair enough. And
That's
so
it.
that was, in fact, going to be where I went to next, and I
Huh.
was only going to preface it by saying that, with a combination of hope and optimism based, in our case, touchwood, on factual medical
Yeah.
information and statistics, and I think a certain amount of sort of adrenaline that one gets into to just go through the motions, etc. One
Mm.
somehow navigates the whole treatment phase, and
Yeah.
then once that treatment phase, strictly speaking, is over and you are theoretically cancer free, in any case, what happens is that all of this negative trauma that one has consciously or unconsciously essentially been suppressing in order to be present and able to deal with that situation tends to just come hurtling down on that person.
So I think what happened was that relatively your treatment compared to what people go through, months of chemo and hair falling out and starting to look
Correct.
sickly, etc., didn't happen, right? It was a surgery and one round of
Yeah.
radio iodine therapy, and that was it. It was happened in Bombay. We all went as a family for Krisha. It was like a little vacation.
Yeah. You guys were on holiday.
Literally, yeah, you were in hospital for 2 days, if at all. And after that, also, we were going out and eating because one is recommended that you stay outdoors. So it that really eased matters. uh, Also, literally, when you're post such a serious thing happening in your life, you are as a patient, one is more aware, right? So as a patient, you were feeling like more in charge of yourself and your health and your life, so you were a lot more positive. We had come back, and that's when COVID hit, right? And so we were isolated. And I mean, again, I don't mean to demean anybody else's experience, but for the lucky few of us, it was pleasant. There was nothing wrong. We are lucky. We received everything we needed to. We were in a home. We had all the
Yeah,
facilities we
we were in
needed.
a very
So
comfortable
we
bubble,
were extremely comfortable.
spending
I just don't
quality
want
time
to
with each other,
come across
watching
as
our daughter
insensitive.
grow
I
up.
know people went through a lot of trouble, but we didn't. And so it just became this extended staycation for us, right? And everything was good, and you were exercising, and food was okay, and everything was okay and happy. And so I think uh, we were relatively blessed. The trauma was very limited during the diagnosis and treatment, and for the first few months after.
um, then how did things change? And this is really the reason why we are having this conversation. It's very
Yeah,
important.
yeah.
So first, why don't you share with the audience what began to happen, what did things slip into, and then the different ways in which both you and I it impacted.
Yeah. So what happens, and that's what I had started to say initially, that I wanted to talk about the aftermath, and a lot of us don't talk about it, forget about any, medical condition, but about anything, about, say, my mother's death, or even something as small as, exam ka result. You focus on the result, but
Mm,
what after? Nobody
mm,
bothers. Maybe the child is feeling very bad that he's failed. Nothing, no such thing is talked about ever.
mm,
So
mm.
even in this case, I felt that nobody prepared us enough, warned us enough that you have lost your thyroid. Now, when they showed me after they'd taken out the thing, it's like this tiny little, barely noticeable thing. But my God, the amount of things that little organ controls, right? It's
Mm.
the most central thing that controls your moods. It controls your weight. It controls your body temperature. It controls a majority of your hormones. So, obviously, once your body had recovered from the trauma of the surgery, etc., and it started to regulate itself, it didn't do a very good job because it didn't have the very organ needed to do that
Yeah.
regulation. So the mood swings, the irritation because of, I mean, every little thing. If one is slightly understepped, slept, feels so cranky, right? But you, I can only imagine, rough, itchy skin, feeling hot suddenly or feeling cold suddenly, not being able to do very many things that we all take for granted, and sort of led you then into going into depression. Now that became, I mean, again, one didn't know or realize or how to cope with it or deal with it, because nobody handheld us through and told us to expect it. So then that spirals into another thing, because then to be first be a caregiver to someone who's gone through cancer, then become a caregiver to somebody who's in depression. No normal human being is equipped for any of that. And despite having a support group, I don't think anybody still told us that, this is going to happen, expect it. We
Yeah.
should maybe preemptively speak to a counselor. Anyway, cancer patients and caregivers should have, regular counseling sessions. Nothing. There's such utter lack of preparedness, which literally led, I think, our relationship and ourselves to spiral out of control.
Um, how do you feel? I know you said that you were also obviously unprepared to first serve as this dutiful caregiver to the cancer itself, and then have the sort of headspace and emotional vitality to also understand and be empathetic and care for somebody who had become depressive yet violent. Um, but I want you to articulate a little more in detail in terms of what would you feel.
uh, it's just, that is hopelessness, not when the cancer comes. That's when you feel hopeless. Like you feel like the life you've built is gone, the person you loved is gone. You completely, your partner changes, it's someone else, right? So it's more about learning how to deal with the loss of someone when they're right in front of you, right? It's not death. I can deal with death. I've dealt with death several times in my life. But to have someone in front of you, yet they are not there. I think that for me was the most difficult part, and it was the most difficult to convey. Uh, and funnily enough, not to convey to my family or friends. They understood what dynamics come into play here is the patient's family, right? Because for them, things haven't changed. For them, they're just happy their brother's here, their son is here, whatever. They are willing to take, they are not at the receiving end of it. Only a partner is at the receiving end of most of this when it happens, when you're depressive or when you're ill, etc., etc. So for me, that was the hopelessness, that was the challenge, that was the, I don't even know big enough words for what that
But
was.
that is again at the cost of upsetting you, and even I'm feeling very emotional. That is what I wanted to solicit because in my earlier dialogues, particularly with Hiba, who is just to remind our viewers, the head onco-psychologist, very specialized at Max Delhi. This is categorically something she went on and on about is uh, almost a grieving process that
Yeah.
caregivers go through, even if there's no loss of life, because that person is not that person at all anymore.
Yeah. And it's the frustration, right? Because you feel like you can deal with these things logically by talking to the person, that it's okay, it's fine, you need help, we'll do this, we'll do that, but that for a certain amount of time that person isn't even listening or receiving any advice or help or anything. Again, especially because in your case it was a thyroid thing, it's your logical brain isn't there anymore for a certain amount of time because it is a mental health condition, then it has transformed into.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this regularly to people who want to know and ask my experience that, ironically enough, during the time I had it, I was fine, and much after I've been buggered. So, yeah, it is precisely for these reasons. Sorry, you were
Also,
saying something.
funnily enough, I've just remembered that, even pre-diagnosis, I now can look back and recall that your mood swings, etc., had started, right? One didn't know it, but obviously that tumor was doing things to
Yes.
your thyroid. Uh, so yeah, so it's like I was trying to say, that it's not the diagnosis and treatment, but it's uske pehle or uske baad. So even if it wasn't you, it was someone who had any other sort of cancer, the physical ailments will start way before it's detected and diagnosed. And then, of course, whatever happens to people after.
Yeah, and so it's important for us to sort of conclude our discussion with this very, very critical fact. It's not even an insight. I don't think it's sort of, it doesn't apply to some cases. It has to be the case in every instance of cancer where in the aftermath there can be very, very significant negative impact on mental health of the patient and of the primary caregiver.
Yeah.
And so, talk a little bit about what people might do, what you or I would have done, and the kinds of recourse one can take or ought to consider.
Again, I mean, I'm very happy to know that Max in Delhi has this resource. I don't think there's any such resource here. Nothing was made available to us, nothing we were made aware of. I just feel that if we did know and had gone through counseling, maybe there wouldn't have been such a traumatic 2, 3 years that we went through, trying to grapple with our own mental health and crumbling relationship. It's only that when we realized, and I, through my studies or talking to people, realized that when someone's not in the right headspace, I cannot hold them responsible for their actions. Did I find it in me to forgive you? And only when you sought treatment for your own mental health issues did you realize your mistakes and make amends. But if this was preemptively done, where we were told, okay, this is going to happen, you should remain in counseling, let's perhaps start giving you anti-anxiety drugs, etc., etc., because it was all preventable, which is what I find ridiculous, and which is why both you and I have started Drive A Devi, because there is no awareness. Everyone, everything is so preventable and is not spoken about, is not diagnosed, discussed. People aren't helped. It's all, this funny stand-up show we were watching where, they say, ki, Arey, lip ka pilo sab theek ho jayega. It's not as simple as that. That I just want to put it out there. Uh, yes, of course, cancer is one of the things, but there are many, many, many other things that people go through. I know someone dear to me whose husband went through a open heart surgery, and she talks about how his behaviors changed, right? You become a little more short. There is little more aggression in the way he wants to work and save, perhaps, whatever. So, things change. If you're, that's something you had spoken about, it's like a गाड़ी नई जैसे चलती है और spare part से चलती है अलग ही होगा. So it the process has to be smoothened. Some professional has to talk to you about it. So seek resources out there. I'm sure Google will help you. I hope
Huh,
you
but I'm
have
just going to
you.
quickly come in here because
Huh,
I know this for a fact. So, while on the one hand, it's absolutely true that specialists or specialized departments or functions aren't really present in India, where, it would say, okay, fine, onco, trauma, whatever,
hmm,
counseling, etc.
hmm, hmm,
I must add very importantly in the same breath that that doesn't have to be the case. Yes, of
hmm,
course, there it's available as an integrated part of, an individual or a family seeking cancer treatment from Max, that
hmm,
establishment.
hmm,
And so
hmm.
therefore it's obviously it has its own advantages, etc. But I can assure you that it's not at all different from going to any traditional psychotherapist suo moto and saying,
Huh,
listen, हमारी situation ये है, ये होने वाला है हमारे साथ, and just as ably and capably that resource will take you through the process of counseling and support, etc., just as a specialized center would. There won't be any difference as such in what they
right.
do.
Okay.
So one doesn't have to at all feel that अरे वो तो सिर्फ दिल्ली में है या इंडिया में सिर्फ 3 centers हैं. There's
No,
nothing
no.
like that. And it's just that yes, we are not in a situation where anyone is going to come and tell us. There's no awareness of it. Of course, that's what we are trying to do, but we can only do that much, which is why seek that intervention suo moto and learning from experiences of people like Anuja and
Yes.
myself that this is not going to be a cakewalk. The actual drama will continue, stroke begin in the aftermath. So preempt it and address it.
Correct. So, like I was going to say, of course, it may not be a professional therapist that is available to you, but there will be support groups. There will be somebody or the other, who's gone through this. Anybody in Jaipur is free to contact us and we'll help them through this. There's so much learning resources online. There's so many books, written out there that you should get and you should educate yourself about. So just don't leave yourself uneducated. Just like you went to school and college, this is an important part of it. This is a bigger part of your education, I feel.
In fact, this gives me an opportunity to share that another thing that Hiba kept telling me continuously is that there have been enough and more instances where, because of the altered, let's call it, altered sensibilities and personality of the patient in the post scenario, relationships and marriages have ended.
Yeah, of
So,
course.
so please know that this needs to be preempted and navigated, and it can easily be done. When it can be
Yeah.
easily done, then why wouldn't one do it?
Why? Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, that's pretty much where we were, right? Till uh, whatever, God intervened, I suppose. Uh, but it's very, very, very difficult, and it's a huge burden for a single person to take on. And it is usually, like I said, one single person who's at the receiving end of it. I'm not saying it has to be the wife or the husband, but just the mother or just
Yeah,
the
yeah, it
father
is
or
the
just
one
one
person for
sibling,
sure.
whoever. And it's therefore ruining an entire family and not just the cancer patient. So yes, just be mentally prepared and fortify yourself with as much as possible.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's truly no rocket science to it, even
Yeah,
if you are now with therapy being so accessible online, even if you
yeah,
feel that you're in a relatively smaller town where, even regular sort of therapists aren't there in that particular town, none of this matters anymore. You just have to be aware that this is going to need to be addressed and address it preemptively.
yeah,
Because ऐसा नहीं कि preemptively address करके बाद में नहीं होगा, but it'll be like, like it'll be 50, 70, 80% better.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It's just about being prepared. Just like we read our pregnancy books, what to expect when you're expecting, it's
Yeah.
genuinely easier.
Wonderful. So I think from that fairly painful revisit, a lot of I mean, this is very, very important. What more can I say? I almost lost you, our marriage, our daughter, my family, my mother. I can't even, I don't have the expression to sum it up. So I think it's important that people heed this as a experience, as a warning, and as a, in fact, as a, opportunity actually to not find themselves in this kind of situation, which is easily preventable. So thank
Don't
you.
smoke.
Thank you very much for doing that, for suggesting it, and take care.